Welcome back to Féile and Football. It's great to see you all in the flesh. As chair of Féile and Football, absolutely delighted to be here today in the historic Felons Club to welcome the dozens here in person and the hundreds virtually joining us back to Féile. So Fáilte Rómh a legan you. This past 18 months or so has had a profound and absolutely devastating impact on so many of our lives. The global pandemic has touched many of us. We continue to live with it and are often reminded daily of its catastrophic impact. Our very world has changed, and as has our relationship with it. However, there is indeed an atmosphere and real sense of community spirit only experienced at Féile. So that's why we're thrilled to introduce real live events back to Féile into the very heart of West Belfast. I want to pay a special tribute on behalf of all of us here and indeed the entire Féile family to our health workers for their heroic and inspirational efforts, and to all of our frontline workers that I'm sure you'll agree have been nothing short of absolutely inspirational. So we're here today in the Felons Club, a pillar of our community, a hub of social and community activity, a long-standing partner and friend of Féile and Football, and an organisation that represents everything that is great and good about West Belfast. The Felons Club was central to the community response of the past 18 months, when despite being closed, they pivoted their entire operation to feed, to resource the most vulnerable in our community. So a big round of applause to the Felons. And it's fitting today, as Féile turns 33, that we gather to launch Gerry Adams's new book, Black Mountain and Other Stories. Gerry is a founder of Féile, who up until this very day, like this very day, 33 years later, continues to support, to challenge, and to frankly inspire us who are tasked with minding the Féile jersey to be the best we can be. So thanks, Gerry, for your continued support on behalf of everyone at Féile. You may not know, or he's probably told us, or will tell us very soon, that he's the reigning Féile Puck Fada champion for the last 32 years. Even when there wasn't a competition last year, he won it. Even when he hasn't made the competition, he still won it. And next Sunday, the 15th of August, Gerry will seek to defend his title on the Black Mountain, which is fittingly where it returns to, next Sunday the 15th. But before I introduce the chair, Timothy O'Grady, no stranger to Féile, for all of you that have made it here, you are in for a treat. So what we'll have here is a Féile golden ticket. So I need someone to help me. Bernie, the photographer, will help me. So Bernie, how many rows is there here? So one of you are going to win this Féile ticket, and Gerry and Tim is going to help us work out how we give that away. So counting from the front, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Flash is getting into the competition. 11 rows, okay? So Gerry and Tim need to look the other way in case they try and box it off. You know what they're like. So you just need to look so you can't see. So look away. Or close your eyes. So Gerry, if you can pick a number between 1 and 11.
I have that saw.
Well, don't pick 11 then. You have to pick a number between 1 and 11.
Right. I'm allowed to look.
No, eyes closed.
Yeah, where are you going around? Alright, 8.
Number 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this woman here with a red coat on gets us the number 8, if I'm right. Yes? Okay. So Tim, you need to pick a number.
No, that's not it. No,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. Well done. So there's 3.
You apologize.
Sorry, lady, or woman in the red coat for that. So we have a number between 1 and 3. This is 1, and that brings us over to 3. So, Tim, if you don't mind, a number between 1 and 3. Number 3. So, is that David Bell? It is David Bell. Round of applause. He's won the Féile golden ticket. So, I'll give this to you on your way away. So we're not doing that for all our debates and discussions or all of our events, because of course we couldn't afford to. So anyhow, so some very brief housekeeping points, and I'm out of here. Follow the one-way system that's in place. Follow the directions of Féile staff that are wearing Féile t-shirts and lanyards, and the Felon staff. And when that's seated, folks, and moving around, please do wear your mask. And we are joined by people virtually all over the world, so if you don't mind, turn your phone on silent. Timothy O'Grady will chair today's event. No stranger to Féile and Fóbal. Welcome back, Tim. Also, an accomplished author and journalist, and no better man to welcome Féile back. So, Tim, it's now over to you. Gara mila, folks.
Well, I'm here because I have some editorial relationship with this book, and because I have some literary connection to Gerry that goes back a long time, and that's why I've been asked to introduce this Féile author of the day, Gerry Adams, former MLA, survivor of Leinster House, former MP. Fortunately, he didn't have to take a seat at that institution. Community activist, resistance leader, negotiator, orator, Gael Gore, tweeter, star of selfies the world over, cookbook author, tree hugger, and as was already mentioned, possessor of Babe Ruth-like prodigiousness with Slither and Puck, and author of numerous pamphlets, blogs, books, including his second book of short stories, The Black Mountain. I first met Gerry in my first time in Belfast in 1982. I was staying in Tom Hartley's house. I was supposed to present a book of my own, and I was sitting in the living room having a cup of tea. I'd never met Gerry before, and he walked into the living room looking rather schoolmasterish with a sleeveless sweater and carrying a pipe, and very silently walked in and very silently walked out. It was quite startling. It was like a newsreel come to life. And then a message came out to me that he'd like a copy of this book that I was there to discuss, but he didn't have the funds, so I suggested that he trade me a copy of his Falls Memories, which was his first book, published that year in 1982. A memoir of the Falls, as it said, but for perhaps discretion reasons and an unstoppable imagination, was sort of bending gently in the direction of fiction. And that's how we began this custom of trading books over the years. When I got back to Tom's house that night, Tom told me the house had been raided, and I found my clothes strewn around my bedroom and my passport opened, and so on. So I wasn't back in Belfast for quite a long time, but we continued to trade books back and forth. Gerry first started writing for publication for Republican News under the name of Brownie, dispatches from the cages of Long Kesh. These were eventually recollected in his book Cage 11, which I reviewed a long time ago, and this was even displayed perhaps even more of a yearning for fiction on his part. I mean, not that they weren't true, but they were disguised and reconfigured and reimagined perhaps stories. And then that was his sixth book. He was already outpacing me when I didn't have anything else to do except write books, and he obviously did have other things to do except write books. By the time the late 90s came along, he was already on his autobiography, Before the Dawn. I got a copy of that in London, and I took it home. I was living in London at the time, and I was living in a house just 30 meters from Douglas Hurd's pied-à-terre, the former Northern Ireland secretary. And whenever he was in residence, he had a country house, but whenever he was in residence in the city, he had 2 police guards 24 hours a day. And I was in front of my house disassembling a bench, and one of these cops came over and wanted to know what I was doing, who I was, in a friendly way it seemed to be, gave me advice about disassembling the bench that I was disassembling, and asked me what I did. It turned out he claimed he read something that I'd written, and then he asked to use the toilet, and he was gone a long time, left the house, tipped his hat, went back to his post. I went back upstairs and found in the bathroom on the toilet where he was sitting on a little table beside the toilet before the dawn with Gerry's face up, signed to me. So if I have the honor of any small entry into British intelligence files, it comes from exchanging books with Gerry Adams. I've known a lot of writers in my time. He's not like any of them. The writers I know apply themselves mostly full-time to that. They get taken by ideas, they live with these ideas, they walk with these ideas, they sleep with these ideas, they marinate these ideas. And that's their only responsibility, usually. He writes on the run, I mean, something he's had experience of, obviously, but being on the run, that is, but so much so that I would think this book could also be called Snatches of Time, because he wrote these stories in little bits whenever he had time after long days of meeting or travel or whatever. So it's an unusual feat to accomplish when your mind is engaged that much in politics and strategizing, and to apply yourself to the time it takes to kind of marinate an idea and deliver it as a story. So it's, even on that account, it's remarkable. The writer Walter Benjamin said that there are two kinds of storytellers: the one who leaves the village and reports on what he or she has seen, and the one who stays there and reports to the people of the village who they are. These stories, The Black Mountain, as the title would suggest, are very much stories of the parish, very much stories of West Belfast. Among their many subjects are prisoners, warriors, a sniper about to take a shot, a child trying to understand death, old men in perpetual second childhoods, lovers, mothers, priests, and such women under duress as a beaten wife, a survivor of abuse, and an African immigrant about to be deported. They are the kinds of stories that priests or doctors might hear, or perhaps former MPs or community activists. They're private stories, stories that are funny, poignant, telling. They archive the ways of life of this community and the language of the working class people of West Belfast. They have an instinct to do that, to preserve and hold. And they are told by a person with a good ear, a receptive heart, and an enviable natural ease with storytelling. So I got a kind of a sense of how he works because, as I said, I had some sort of editorial involvement with this book. When I heard he had a deadline to finish it that had been much delayed, I asked him if he'd like me to go over the stories with him because he had to get them ready for publication. So we had a lot. I am living in Poland. We had a lot of back and forth last summer about these stories, long conversations in the evenings. It was very pleasurable, very interesting. But again, it was, after 12 hours of Zoom meetings trying to unite the island. Before or after, he had to write a position paper or a funeral oration. Sometimes he'd be in his back garden, rain falling from the shed, blackbirds calling, grandchildren playing. Once in Donegal, we had a conversation, and he had a bit of peace then. He was sitting in another shed there, watching the sunset over the bloody foreland, listening to Van Morrison and drinking a glass of wine. So, it was another snatch of time, just in editing as is the writing. So I just hope that this book will be read, and those who read it will spread the word about it, and it gets maybe a better shot than other books of his, which also deserved attention, but maybe didn't get as much as they should. So Gerry's now going to read some sections from the book, and then we'll have a little chat, and then if we have time, if anybody has any questions, we'll open it up to the floor. Thank you.
This is Lauren. Well, first of all, Gordon Margaret, Tim. Tá my hands sasta to Gordon Shaw and Belfast. A race shockers tá my wake Davesha, go yarn the dini well the Hela, come the Merlock. My way has produced O'Brien Press. Been Skeelty Shaw, ag fast or fau Shay Blenta, Anish, August Maradurt, Tim, and a bit midget over there, sé go han jazz lumsa when my salt go more and more as our Cora. I want to Cora out near to Pat McGee and Shaw. Pat McGee's here, and Pat's has a book being launched tomorrow night down in Áras Ó Caníla. So just welcome, Pat, and good to see you. So I don't intend to say an awful lot. I'll read wee bits out of this. I did enjoy very much the conversations that Tim has described. This book is about 6 years in the making. I want to thank O'Brien Press for publishing it, and also for publishing it onto the Brandon imprint. Brandon published my first books a way back, and the publisher, Steve McDonagh, has since died, so I thought it was really very good of Megan O'Brien to keep that imprint going in memory of Steve. You could talk for ages, and there are other writers here, better writers than me, about the whole process of writing. But what Tim's conversations with me brought me to was a certain pleasure in developing whatever I was trying to say, and also a sort of a bit of an amazement of where these stories go. Because while in some fables you know what you want to say, but in others they just take on a life of their own. I also, just because Alec Maskey has announced his standing down from high office, just want to dedicate these remarks to him and to Liz. Alec's one of our stalwarts, and hopefully in time we will be able to pay tribute to him and Liz properly, and also find him some work to do in the meantime. So I also want to thank Fela. I wouldn't want to launch this book anywhere else except at Fela. So I've just picked out. It's hard to find in the middle of this something which is self-contained, that can be encapsulated in 2 or 3 minutes of a reading without giving away the whole story. So the first one I thought would be just to give you a sense of Black Mountain. And this is about 2 old boys who live and have lived all their lives in the shadow of the Black Mountain. And they walk it, even in hard times, they walk the mountain. So this is just a little insight into it. From where they sat, Black Mountain was in plain view. They rested contentedly, looking up at its green slopes. "You know," said Harry, "the way an old dog gets up after lying down for a while. You know how it gets up and stretches itself and gives itself a wee shake, and then it might give another wee shake, and then another wee stretch, and its coat seems to give a wee shiver, and it might yawn, and then it slowly danders off." "Aye," said Tom. "Well," Harry continued, "I think the Black Mountain is like an old dog sprawled out deep in slumber. I often wonder what we would do if it got up and stretched itself and then dandered off." Tom said nothing for a long minute as he looked up at the mountain, and then at Harry. The Black Mountain was omnipresent in the lives of the people who lived below it. Some hardy souls still live at the top of the Loney, and it wasn't long ago that a family farmed in the Hatchetfield. Beyond its dark ridge, there are medieval remains, ring forts, ancient quarries where flint, arrows, and spearheads are still to be unearthed. There are archaeological ruins, old lazy beds, remnants of human existence since time began. Fairy forts too, for those who believe in fairies. There are hares and rabbits and pine martens, all types of birds, bogland and moorland, mountain meadows and steep rock faces, mountain streams, heather and every variety of wild flowers. Tom and Harry were exceptional. They knew every inch of the dark mountainy slopes, the ridges and gullies, the sheep tracks and the high passes. Most days, except for the years of military occupation, they looked down from the mountain, never tiring of the vista below them. In the poorly appointed housing estates at the foot of the mountain, people lived their lives looking up at it. Sometimes, like the working poor in places like this over the centuries, living through tough times, weighed down by poverty and disadvantage. And perhaps some of them did not look up too often. But the community in the face of adversity became close, mindful of those who lived lives of grinding misery. Local leaders organised and agitated, hopeful that change would come. Then conflict erupted, and the mountain slopes echoed to the sound of gunshots and explosions and the stench of CR and CS gas, and smoke contaminated the mountain air. British troops dug in and built fortifications overlooking the neighbourhood. They surveyed everything, every house, every man, every woman, children even. Every day and most nights they sallied forth to suppress the local populace, including Tom and Harry and their neighbours. The conflict, now thankfully over, left some of their friends scarred. Others did not survive. Divisions remain. The Black Mountain was impervious to it all. From Neolithic to modern times, from when the first boulders were laid in the wall of a ringford until the last brick was laid in the new Spring Hill estate, the Black Mountain witnessed everything. Throughout all these centuries, Tom reflected, it was unlikely that anyone had ever compared the Black Mountain to a sleeping dog. Only Harry could think of that, he concluded. I used to think our walks on the mountain kept us sane. Now listening to you, I'm not so sure. You know, there's ways are locked up. So that's just a wee insight into that. Somebody guide me, Grania, just in time. Have we have time for another one? Yeah. Okay, so this is a totally different type of a story. And this is about a young woman called Nora. And she's in Dublin overnight, and she's in a hotel. And I'll just read a page or two. She unpacked her clothes, but was drawn to the wallpaper. She looked closely at it, ran her hand over the circular bouquets of bluebells on the pale pink background. It was like seeing a face in a crowd she couldn't quite place. And then it came to her. The house in West Belfast from her childhood. The room she shared with her little sister Sarah. Not much money in the house. Bare wooden floorboards before they became fashionable. No oilcloth or carpet in their rooms, but the same lovely pink wallpaper covered with bluebells just beside their bed. What are bluebells for? Sarah had once asked her. They were lying in bed on a bright Saturday morning. No school, no work, a lie-in. What do you mean, what are they for? Nora asked her. Sarah was studying the bluebell patterns curiously. Nora turned in her bed so that they were almost nose to nose. Taking her little sister's little face between her palms, she kissed her gently on the forehead. I mean, what are bluebells for? Wah wah, Sarah giggled, kicking the bedclothes off them both and trying to escape from Nora's hug. Bluebells are for love, Nora said. Miss Thompson taught us that in St. Louise's. Patrick Kavanagh wrote it. It's one of my favourite poems. So there you go. You didn't know your big sister knew poetry, did you? All the while she tried to hug Sarah, and Sarah resisted, kicking and squealing and twisting in the bed and trying to tickle her in retaliation. Don't you dare call me a wawa, Nora repeated again. The two of them giggled and wrestled together like this until their mother shouted up to them to come downstairs for breakfast. On Saturdays, that meant a special treat, a fry. Bacon, sausages, fried egg with fried soda and potato bread. Black and white pudding, served with lashings of HP brown sauce. The two sisters eventually came down into the kitchen, still giggling and giddy after their exuberant bout of horseplay. Their mother greeted them with a smile. I don't know which of you is the biggest child. That was 30 years ago. The Bluebells brought it all back to her. Sarah had two wee girls of her own now. Nora was godmother to one of them. That night, in her hotel room, she had a dream which woke her with a start. She sat bolt upright in her strange bed. The dream was terrifyingly real, but Nora couldn't remember what it was about. It seemed to disappear as she tried to find it, but the fear remained. She stretched her hand out from beneath the sheets and again touched the bluebell pattern on the wallpaper. It stood out vaguely from the pink. It stood out slightly from the pink background. The bluebells, she recalled vaguely, had been there too in the dream. So Sinead, and I can give you another wee bit, or we can go on. What do you want to do? Okay, so we go over to the Aglov and Gormagat. Moihu Grania. Tim and I are used to being bossed about by women.
So Gerry, is this on? Hello? Oh yeah, like that, okay. So Gerry, before we get underway, is there anything you'd like to deny?
Yes, well, I have never been a member of any writers.
Okay, well, join it. You're welcome. Just give us an idea of how did you begin your relationship and why, if it's possible for you to say, with writing?
Well, when I was a kid, my granny Adams was a great reader, and she introduced me to the Falls Library. Sorry, Don. When I was a young fella, my granny Adams, who was a great reader, introduced me to the Falls Library there down at Sebastopol Street, and I became a very ferocious reader. The writing bit, Donnie Morrison inveigled me into doing a piece, as Tim has described, for Republican News. And it was supposed to be looking at what was happening outside. This was 1975. But it really became, well, it did look at things outside, of course, and give a view, but it also became a sort of a reflection of what was happening in the cage that I was in, Cage 11. And then subsequently that was published sometime later. I always regretted I didn't write it properly as a novel. Falls Memories was the first book that I published. Again, it was a piece I wrote in the Republican News. The Brits were very heavy on the ground down on the main Falls Road, so I cut into the district, which I hadn't been in for a while. And I saw the devastation of war, but also of the demolition that was ongoing. And that was the trigger for writing an article. And both John Feehan from Mercier and Steve McDonagh from Brandon asked me could I make it into a book. And it was a very haphazard enterprise. So I like writing. I don't like writing so much the stuff that I consider to be work, but I do like losing myself in the likes of this. But the fact that it took 6 years to do shows you it was just fitted in, as you said, in bits of time.
Writing is an activity that, for writers, results in them needing therapy sometimes. Can you describe, you've said to me that you consider writing therapeutic. Maybe it's a respite from something, or time alone, it's a respite from some way of thinking. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, it's a solitary pursuit. You know, the sort of job that we did in terms of editing and your suggestions and advice and so on. But the actual creation of the stories is a solitary occupation, in most cases anyway. And I find I like that. I don't mind solitude. I live a very, very busy life. I have a very close family, which are a joy, and I have a pile of comrades and friends over a long time. So I spend a lot of time with other people, and even in pandemic times, Zoom calls and all of that. So there is a sort of a respite in doing something outside of all of that. You know, and some people might go and drink, and some people might go and play golf or play hurling or football or walk, and I do all of those things, but I also do a wee bit of footering at Reading as well, and I just say I like that experience.
Are there any writers, including songwriters, who you take from, you learn from, that you've read or listened to that take you further as a writer? Any in particular?
I should have said that this book is dedicated to Richard Macaulay. I should have said that at the beginning. Where is Richard Macaulay?
Right there.
Would Richard Macaulay stand up? You are standing up? I meant to say that at the very beginning, Richard. Well, songwriters. Well, one of my favorite songs is actually. I forget the name of the bloody thing, but I think it's The Rose of Trelawny, Christy Moore. It's a sort of a talking blues. Goes on for about 15 or 16 minutes because it tells a story, and it's funny and humorous and true as well. I listen to a lot of music. I love music. I listen to music most of the hours of the day. I don't watch television so much. I want to give a plug for Radio Falcha. I've been listening to Radio Falcha just during this pandemic, and it's a brilliant piece of public broadcasting through the Irish language. So there are lots of stories in the tradition, and there are more of my contemporaries like Chris Gustavus or Johnny Cash, people like that also are Willie Nelson, also storytellers. And then there are the whole raft of modern day writers who are just terrific. Imelda May has a book of poetry coming out. I understand she's a great storyteller. So all those things sort of tell of the human experience. I think, you know, without being too pompous, it is something to have a written word in whatever language on a piece of paper. So you put it on a piece of paper, and then somebody reads it. So what has come out of your imagination goes into their imagination, and then it can make them cry or make them happy or make them angry and move them. So I think there's a bit of magic around that. It's the same for painters, photographers, songwriters, playwrights, that you can actually construct something which can jump from one person's mind into another person's mind and have an effect on them.
When you're writing, do you imagine this person? Do you imagine some version of an audience and how what you are saying might reach them? I mean, is that in your head, like some version of yourself or some other ideal reader or something that you feel, because it is like a kind of a connection starts, an idea happens, and the circuit is completed when it arrives. But I mean, can you do that within your own head as you're writing?
Sometimes it depends on the subject, and it also depends, I suppose, on what mood that I'm in. I constructed a story there called A Good Confession, and I was trying to, in my own head, to explain the relationship at that time between the Catholic Church and people from a community like this, particularly older people who were squandered by the way the church leadership was behaving. So that story was written with that purpose. But I was trying to figure this out myself, and I mentioned this in the little reverend, a little introduction. Do you write for yourself? And I was reading a thing from Stephen King there recently, and he said, always write for yourself. So I suppose, and the essence of it is, I'm writing for myself. There's a sort of a need, and you can become a thief. Anybody that's written will know this. Somebody will say something quirky or funny or sad or angry, and you try to remember it. You try to remember the line that they used or the sentence that they used, and then later on, it will inculcate itself into some story. I think the use of computers is amazing. I used to have maybe just a little idea, so I would have written 100 words and just put it into the computer, and then 3 years later you would have dug it out, and its time had come. It fitted into something that you were working on.
Most of your memoir work and your, well, not all of the autobiographical work, but your fictional work certainly, and Paul's Memories, Cage 11, is very much of West Belfast. Can you say something about your relationship to this place, not only as a community activist or a politician, but as a writer, your writerly connection with this place? Because there is a sense in which something, you go back in a lot of stories to the past, even your childhood. There's a lot of words that are very specific to this place, people that are very specific to this place. So seems to be a kind of archival aspect, a holding in time of these places. Can you just talk a little bit about your relationship to this place?
Well, I think this is an amazing community. Obviously it has its faults and its flaws like all of us, but to have come through, people of my age to have survived almost 40 years of military occupation, and we just take it that that's what we did. But that's what it was like. So there's an amazing sort of caliber of people here. I found when I was doing work as a public representative that I did a huge amount of work with women, and that whether it was a housing campaign or an environmental issue, whether it was got to do with repression or issues to do with the conflict, women were front and center of it all. And it struck me as being the real, even though this is not reflected yet in public life, as being the real matriarchs of this community. And because the community suffered so much from, not just from the physical aspects of the conflict, and the community did inflict hurt on itself as well through the different armed groups, but suffered so much from being depicted as being animals, as being savages, as being in some way inferior. So, part of what I like to think we can talk about is to show our best side of this. Like Fela is a brilliant example of that. And also as we move beyond, there was an interesting experience. When the war was on and these communities were under siege, issues of domestic violence, of abuse, of sexual abuse, of child abuse, were in many ways covered up. Other difficulties were in many ways covered up because the community was under so much pressure, and even events that happened during the conflict itself. But with the beginning of the peace process, the community opened up. I mean, it's a slightly different community than what it was during the conflict for understandable reasons. But now we can write about, and I do it here, about issues like domestic violence and abuse and so on. And I think that's to the good that we can do that.
Writing usually involves some reaching into the inner lives of other people. It's also very humbling, and it's not to say that you're not humble or that you can't reach into the lives of other people, but I'm wondering, is there anything that you take from writing that you bring into your political life, from things that you learn in writing?
Well, I suppose it's back to telling the story. You know, you can win people over with the logic, with a mechanical, with a tactical, with a logistical argument. The best argument is the argument of the heart. So you obviously you need the argument of the head as well, but the best, and stories essentially, I suppose, at least, they aspire to be stories of the heart, as you've said, people's inner lives. So if you can if you can connect with people, and including people who are enemies, and including people who see themselves as opponents, including people who are estranged from us at the moment and who would want to see, for reasons which most of us would find totally incomprehensible, they want to see the union with Britain continuing. We have to try and touch them in their hearts, and then we can build all the economic and social and other arguments. But unless we can click at that sort of level, and we have in this city particularly so much in common, working class people who have been divided for centuries and decades. So I suppose, and I'm not saying I do this, by the way, but if there was something to be learned from it, it would be to try and make that connection with people.
If I, like many outsiders, was looking at West Belfast through the news media, it would be this depiction of this. It would be a very demeaning picture. It would also be a very depressing picture, a very grey picture, a picture of a lot of people in depressed states and shadows. Men with masks, broken bottles, chaos. But whenever I came to West Belfast, I'd never see play audiences like it. The walls were full of paint, depictions of Bob Marley and Cuchulainn, and then I came to the early days of Fela, and it is such an exuberant display of a community expressing itself. So I just wonder, why is it that West Belfast is so self-expressive? Would you say so many writers come out of it, so much representation of self comes out of it?
Well, I think it's the same everywhere. To be fair, I would watch T.G. Cahir, and there'd be a big burly man would come on, and a big soft country man, and he would take a Bosca Cioli, he would take an accordion or a melodeon, and then he would play with delicacy an air that is 300 years old. But if you met him in a tractor and you just give him a wave of the hand. So I think we're lucky. Maybe it's the same in all nations and all countries, that there are all of these people out there who, what do people want out of life? They want to be happy. You know, that's essentially what people want. They want to be happy. They don't really want to do anybody any harm, and they want to be treated properly. So probably just because of the role that West Belfast played in the conflict and in the struggle, maybe it's intensified here. But you know, go into rural areas, go into other communities, and thankfully there are more women writing. There are more working class authors writing. There's, I list, I hope I didn't leave anybody out, former Republican prisoners who are writing. So while West Belfast might be unique, it isn't actually unique in terms of the creativity of its people. It has learned to tell the world about the creativity of its people. That's the difference. We tell people. Right? We tell people we've got poets, writers, singers, painters, photographers, and so on, quilt makers. Whereas maybe other communities haven't got to the point where they have the confidence to say, this is our story. So, you know, I'm sure there are some people from North Belfast or East Belfast or South Belfast who could do exactly the same job, or anywhere else, you know, rural or urban across the island.
I've only got through half my questions, and we hope to have questions from you if you wanted to ask them, but there's another event starting, so we're going to have to wrap up this part of it. I think Gerry's going to sign books, so...
I just give a wee... So what we're going to do, we decided because there's so much you just can talk about. There's, for everyone in the audience, if you'd like to remain seated, what we have to do is just say goodbye to our virtual audience for now. We have another virtual event lined up at 2 p.m. So thank you to everyone who tuned in from home or wherever you are. What we will do is, if we want to open up for questions to the audience, we'll have that opportunity, and then we can do the book signing. So we're happy to go ahead with that if you are. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Brilliant. And thank you.
Just before you go, Tim, Molly McCann. Mal McCann did this cover. Normally when I'm doing any gig, I write down notes. I neglected to do so for this one, so that's why I'm picking up. So Mal, brilliant piece of work. I hope you got the very big check that I sent you in the post.